Excuse me for interrupting, but I'm very excited because this is the last panel, and we're almost done. So we hope we can make it for the last one. And Ullman has a responsibility to, this great responsibility to end well summit. But thank you all for coming. After this, we're going to have closing remarks, but everything has been very good, and we have had so much good feedback from you, and thank you for coming. But we're going to have a space to say some words. But for now, I would like to introduce the next panel. It's the industry panel. So people from Mexico, from all Latin America, and also the US companies here that are coming here to give recommendations on AI for LATAM. And this industry panel is going to focus on their experiences and how we can advance Latin America with AI from the industry side. And Ullman, he's the director of the Latin American office based on MIT Sloan, and he has been a very good support for us. He has been instrumental for this summit to happen. He has given advice to us. Every time I have asked him for a meeting or anything, he's always very available, and I want to thank Lee for that. But without further ado, let's welcome Lee. Lee Ullman, please.
So I think the panelists should just all come up, and we're not going to introduce each one. If you guys come up, I think that's the best thing, and maybe Omar, maybe you can ask the people in the outside to come in, and then we'll get started. Everyone? Perfect. Reverb. Yeah, that's fine. So first off, I'd like to thank Omar and the organizers of this event. It's really wonderful to see graduate students, a postdoc, bring this all together. When they first introduced this to me about a year ago through Jordi, who I don't see him here, but another industry partner, it was incredible that a group of students wanted to get together and make something happen. And the fact that this actually came together with so many guests from all over the region, it's quite amazing. I personally think that as one of the last panels or the last things of the conference, the industry panel is ultimately one of the most important, as much as we speak about the need for universities like MIT, who, again, I lead the first office that MIT created, and this office is in Latin America. It's based in Chile, but it's for all of the region. And this is only one of many programs that MIT does in Latin America. We have many different programs, professors constantly in the region. So if people are interested in connecting, please let me know. But all of the research, all of what we're doing, the only way it really gets out to the masses is because of these people. It's because of the private sector that we actually are able to, at least in Latin America, have contact with what's going on with AI and machine learning. So what we're going to do is try to do an informal panel and also have you as the audience ask questions. But I think the first thing that I'd like to ask is everyone just to introduce themselves and what they actually do, because I know with AI, with the tech world in Latin America, everyone has very fancy titles. It all sounds really important, but what you ask them what they do, oh, I sell software. That's not the point of this panel, right? These are the people who are developing it. So what I want to get is actually what their company is, what their name is, and what they actually do within their company in terms of AI, machine learning, or deep.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lee. Again, thank you guys for staying and listening to us. So I'm Miguel Paredes. I am the Vice President for Artificial Intelligence and Data at RIMAC Seguros, which is one of Peru's largest insurance companies. And for the last year and a half, I've been working in this space, leading teams of analytics, AI, and folks building these machine learning models for the insurance industry. Before that, I was here at MIT finishing up my PhD. I was in CSAIL working on applied machine learning, and I helped start a center that was doing AI in one of Peru's largest economic conglomerates, building AI machine learning models for different industries like mining, fishing, hospitality, et cetera. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Gustavo Parés. I'm from Mexico, and I started a company called NDS Cognitive Labs with my brother as my partner. And we are trying to build an ecosystem to accelerate Mexico market into adopting artificial intelligence through solutions. So what we're doing is we're investing a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of passion into trying to understand how we can leverage all these incredible capabilities of the cloud in terms of natural language processing, advanced analytics, machine learning, in order to solve specific problems, how an airline can make easier the life for a customer, how can banks give a better service, how can retail companies offer a promotion that makes sense to you. And we face a lot of challenges in terms of how to finance our projects, how to convince our clients that we can do it. And to be able to build, that's why I mentioned an ecosystem, because you need people, talent, money, customers, and it's been an amazing journey, and really glad to share a little bit about this today.
Thank you. My name is Alex Camino. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Softtek. I had the opportunity to start the day, and now closing the day. The first and last sessions are always the hardest. So I appreciate the opportunity. I work for a company called Softtek. Softtek is a service provider born in Mexico 38 years ago. Born in Mexico. Today we are roughly 15,000 people around the world. Very proud of our entrepreneurial history. And today we help our clients to evolve through digital technologies, implement the technologies that are created in spaces like here, MIT, and bring them to the real life. We take the technologies that companies like Microsoft or AWS or Oracle create, and we bring them to life for our customers. You asked us to say what we actually do, and I'm the CMO, so
sound important.
No, one of my favorite books is called "All Marketers Are Liars," so I guess you can take everything I say with a grain of salt. So, thank you.
Excellent.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Lee. Thanks everyone for this event. I would like to highlight a little bit. I think it's really important, this kind of events. Not only for the connections that we are making, but also I think it's really important to have a unified agenda between everyone. This room is and has been full of leaders last couple of days, and it's really important that we know where to put the focus once we are back to our teams or back on Latin America. So as I mentioned, my name is Matias. I work for a small startup in San Francisco that is called Miroculus. And we have our team in Latin America. So as we like to say, we have best of both worlds or worst of both worlds. It depends. But we have a lot of resources here because since the company is based on the Bay Area in San Francisco, we have a lot of investment and things like that. And then we have a lot of talent in Latin America with our teams. We have our software team there, and we are developing a lot of things. I think that in terms of talent, in terms of people, Latin America has been really important, especially in the last couple of years. Technology, I feel like, has been like an equalizer right now with internet and with a lot of things. Also, for example, the cloud providers is really important because we can access a lot of tools and we can start building right away, especially for a small startup. I think that we are the smallest startup here. So for us, it's really important not to reinvent the wheel and start working with technology that other people have developed. So what we do, right? We have a lot of projects in AI, but basically what we are doing is creating a platform to automate molecular testing. And we are doing that using IoT technologies. We are putting a lot of intelligence on the device. We are doing some routing, some processing on the cloud, and putting the inference on the device. So we are trying different models, different approaches, and the important thing is that it's all made for people in Latin America. We have offices in Buenos Aires, Colombia, and Mexico. So that's basically what we're doing.
Thanks, Alejandro.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luis Pineda. I work at Facebook AI Research. Facebook AI Research is a branch of Facebook that is, its goal is to do fundamental research in AI, machine learning. And basically the primary objective is to publish research that everyone can use. And the type of research that's done at FAIR is a wide variety: computer vision, natural language processing, reinforcement learning, applications in healthcare. There are also applications for social benefit. There is a wide variety of research done there. And I work in the Montreal office, and I work, my main area of research is reinforcement learning, and I'm working with applications to MRI acquisition, so trying to accelerate MRI acquisition. I've been there for 1 year. Before that, I finished my PhD at UMass Amherst here in Massachusetts. And before that, a few years ago, I'm from Venezuela. I was a professor in the Universidad Zulia in Maracaibo, Venezuela.
Excellent. Thanks, Luis. Leda?
Well, I'm Leda Basombrio. I work as data science lead, to simplify the title, at the Center of Advanced Analytics at Banco de Credito de Peru. I'm Peruvian. I work in Lima. Basically, we run like around from 8 to 12 projects of analytics concurrently, and we attend the whole corporation. So we have applications that run from pricing and micro-lending in Banco, pricing for FX with the treasury. Then we run projects, about everything related to CRM, propensity to buy models, income predictors. Then also we work with a wholesale, creating new strategies to attract balances. With insurance company, we've worked like a lot of initiatives to identify fraud or do pricing for the car insurance products and so on. So the list is very large. But basically, we have to deal from the whole cycle of analytics, the end-to-end process, since the data extraction. So we have to suffer everything related to data warehouse, data sources, compile information, generate features up to the end. So we suffer 80% of our projects is actually data preparation, and then to have fun for 1 month, and then suffer again for deployment and doing the value-added measurement. So that's basically the scope of our work. And also within the team, we have a mentoring role of coaching our I call them kids, but some of them are really old. So we contribute to their formation towards actually having all the aptitudes and fields of and formation they need to become really solid data scientists that actually solve real business problems that generate value.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. So as you all heard, we pretty much have from the small startup to the monster Facebook here. And one of the big things, and there was obviously earlier in the summit, a government panel. And in Latin America, mostly everyone thinks the government is the one that needs to be pushing things. But if you look at the United States now, a lot of what's going on in AI is being pushed by private companies. And private company labs are now even surpassing university labs. So the first question for you, or following up the intros, is what's your feeling about how industry in Latin America should be promoting and strengthening the future of AI, and thinking about that from regulation, from actually development, and actually making AI strong and not just a product from the Northern Hemisphere, but actually something that's coming from the local population. So I don't know if Facebook, who is the most adept at doing that, would want to start, or we'll start with the liar. So,
We'll start with Facebook.
Okay. Well, I think it's important the role of industry, and not just large companies, but private sector in each country. It's very important to sort of be closely connected with academia in terms of what their needs are, and how these needs can be basically met by the output of academia, which is students and professionals, right? And also, there is sometimes, I mean, now I'm not talking from the Facebook experience, but more from like my experience back home, which I feel sometimes education can tend to be seen as a way to get a job rather than to innovate and to solve, problems, or just to like, okay, you're being educated to go to the workforce and earn money, right? And I think it's because maybe in my experience, there's been some disconnect onto, we have these problems that we need solutions for, and we cannot just get technology from outside, but we need to sort of innovate in-house because, it's easier access for us, it's a way to build up, right? And in terms of like industry in a company like Facebook, I think one sort of obvious opportunity that I think is already happening is that these big companies, including Facebook, are participating in education programs in Africa, Latin America. For example, there was one in Uruguay called Kipu, where people from different companies and academia went there to give lectures to students and establish connections, right? This is a way to contribute. And I think the next step to that is how to just not teach, but what is the bridge from like education to actual, incorporating into some sort of market, right? Either the company, I guess an initiative like this startup is really, I find it really cool, right? Because they have, they're in both ends, right? So they have resources here in the US, but then they are like also building talent back in Latin America. This kind of initiatives, I think, is really important.
In our experience, what we have seen is that one thing that we see in common in Latin America is that it's very hard to establish long-term initiatives, especially with governments. Most likely, the initiatives and the timeframes are 4, maybe 6 years tops, and in those countries where there's where the administrations can be re-elected, well, probably it tends to be a little bit longer, but it's usually the terms are very short. So I think from the private sector perspective, what we have learned is to moderate the expectations that we have of the government driving these changes. Probably setting the ground rules at a level like, for instance, I think something that Mexico has done really well. Mexico, that's where we are headquartered. That Mexico has done really well is the privacy, the data privacy framework that it establishes, basically modeled around GDPR, and that will help to establish a groundwork. But I don't think it's going to go beyond that. So in our experience, what we have seen is that we don't have to wait. We should not expect to have the government driving the initiatives. We need to in some way share the experiences, educate, contribute to educate them, and then start showcasing the progress and the things that can be done. And in that way, in that sense, well, they're probably going to start supporting that more long term. But probably the biggest challenge that we've seen is the lack of long-term initiatives. And I think something like this requires a 20-year vision or something around that.
From the banking, because obviously this is not the bank's main product that they're delivering.
No.
How do they feel about trying to promote this and strengthen it?
A way we've started to, like, a very naive or small way we're trying or starting to do it is try to complement formal education from our side. So what have been starting to do is we are creating like a course that's like a workshop hands-on with a business case or a case of the bank in some post-grad programs. So we actually go there and with the students, I don't know, I remember how many hours of classes or 3 sessions. We go and we go through the end-to-end of how will be on real life the development of a project. So that's like a way we try to complement the formation so that they have this real practice experience so that they all these people graduating from all these programs get, I mean, this feeling of how does real life, like real work means. Aside from that, I have to be honest, like we do a lot of innovation, we try to push our limits, but actually it's within the corporation, within our products. It's not like we are publishing a paper outside so that everybody knows what we are doing. It's actually like copyright from the company that we are like focusing on the inside. The only way I see that we're starting to do or getting out is through this academic kind of like support we are give. So that's
From the startup viewpoint?
I think that there's a clear pattern here from what everyone's saying. And it's a role and it's an involvement going forward and going backward. And maybe we can start thinking about going backwards from the industry to the universities, to the academia. A lot of times we see that there's a gap between those, and I'm a strong believer that it's a role of the industry that they need to promote more politics and more ideas to bring more people onto the table. Especially in Latin America, or at least in Argentina. I'm from Argentina. And the thing that I see is that since we don't have a formal education for AI, it's not a career that leaves you AI engineer or something like that. A lot of times on the industry, they need to train, they need to give them some education. So I think that it's a good thing from the industry to take that role. And moving forward, I think that as everyone here should agree, industry is a major beneficiary and also responsible for pushing innovation and for pushing new regulations. So I think that they should be the ones teaching and helping the regulators what are the scope, what are the domains of their products, and I think that's how it should be done.
Miguel, Gustavo, anything to add?
Please.
Well, about the role of the government, the role of the academia, the role of the business. At this point, I just want to think that we're really lucky in Mexico to have the free trade agreement. And that's what we're part of one of the largest trading blocs in the world, and we're
Old one or the new one?
both. A little bit of both, you know, because I think we ended up being the largest trading partner with US last year, and this is amazing for Mexico. So with all the chaos we might have sometimes in Mexico, we're always there. There's always a couple of things missing, but we're always there, and we have all the potential to do more important things. In terms of academia, we saw there was a lack. Even we work with the best universities in Mexico. There was a lack of what they were teaching or what we needed. We have a couple of clients in California, and they were saying, I need to roll out this in GCP or Azure. And the curriculum goes and it's assessed and changed every 5 years or 3 years. It's like an eternity right now in this era. So we had to start developing our training material and start working with universities to teach our own courses in order to be able to catch up. And many times you need to catch up with something that has not even documentation from the software vendor. So it's a pretty challenging scenario, but it's manageable. The second thing is about access to funding and capital. There is almost none funding for startups in Mexico or for accelerating companies in Mexico to the way we need to do, because imagine we have a couple, obviously we work with important companies in Mexico, in financial services, in retail, in manufacturing, and we also have a couple of clients in Texas and California, but when they are assessing our services, our pricing, they are comparing us with the best in the world. So we need to be able to compete with the best in the world, and we're winning every time more battles, and we're really happy because there's always a way. And finally, talking about the business leaders, because we've discussed very little about the mindset of the business leader that really don't have a clear understanding about how to mix the technology that is going to be exponential or radical or whatever you want to call it, how it's going to impact the value that is in their industry and how this is going to change their business model. So that's a really important thing, because when you go to a company, they might have a very vague understanding of what AI or advanced analytics is going to make on their business. And there's an important discussion there still to have.
So I think once the private sector industry understands that we need to get together and work on certain issues, because if we don't, it'll be a low equilibrium for all of us. I think education is an obvious one, right? So I think there's many efforts around partnering with academia, many efforts around education, and understanding that in the end, if we help education, for example, in Peru or in many of our Latin American countries, that'll benefit all of us. Another one is thinking, how can we share data within the constraints of sharing data at an aggregate level, where there's social welfare, social well-being, for example, in insurance, in terms of fraud data, or other spaces where in the States, for example, you will know if a certain car or a certain person has had claims, if they have risky behavior, that'll show up in certain public records. In Peru, we don't have that. So that just generates a costly system for people who are good drivers, healthy people, or the costs of fraudulent activity or abuse just increases the costs on non-folks. So there's some conversations at the government level, mostly in the guilds of the companies, that are trying to see, how do we merge data? How do we use data? How do we have a third party that is not associated but can regulate and can actually coordinate, so we can use data for the well-being of the country, and not only do we win, but society wins.
So one of the things that I'm hearing throughout, and Miguel also mentioned, is education. But it would be interesting, at least for the audience or for me, to know, and based on your hiring. So in the region, you always hear there's a falta de capital humano. There's a lack of people that you can actually employ, not because they don't exist, but because they're not educated enough or they don't have enough ability. So if you could speak about, within your own company, the difficulty of actually getting people to be able to work at the level you want, and if you can share, of all the applications, of 100 applications you get, how many are actually qualified? Because I think one of the big challenges going forward is that industry is unable to get the people they need to actually move forward. And it's a problem in the United States, it's a problem everywhere, but I think it's even more so for Latin America, because there are companies like yours that want to move forward. They don't just want to buy, but they want to actually create. And if you don't have good people to create these things, you don't have a future. So what's the situation within your different companies? And we can start ladies first and then move this way, but you get stuck at the end.
So that's actually a huge problem, real problem, that we've been trying to address for some years now. Concerning the numbers, because we're all quants. So for a position, sometimes it takes us for 6 months to fill in the gaps, because
that's an entry-level position?
Entry-level position. Entry-level position can range from 2 to 4 months. Senior positions can range from 3 to 8, 9, 10 months. The lack of supply is higher or more problematic at more senior levels. So from the people we evaluate at entry levels, and actually I ran the stats some months ago to have a meeting with HR to say, okay, we have to do something. I would say that around only 10% pass oral filters. We run a lot of filters, technicals, the knowledge, and even though we know that a huge part of the formation will be completed inside, because we have our own trainings run within the team. But for a senior position, only 3% pass is very critical. So this is funny, because with Miguel, it's practically we're fighting for the same people. The main 4 or 5 companies in Peru, Telco, Movistar, RIMAC, Intercorp, MSP, Grupo Romero, they're all fighting for the same first name, last name. people like constantly. Like, okay, now you want to come, now you got bored, blah, 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 whatever, because it's like we don't have enough talent. I think that for entry levels it's easier because now with the boom and the marketing, the liars that sold AI throughout the world for the last 3 years. Because before that, I mean, 2014 or 2013, people were talking of still data mining, like data mining analyst, the data science concept. I don't know what happened, but in the last 3-4 years, I mean, everybody wants to do it. Everybody wants to do that. Nobody knows what it is, but everybody wants to turn and start like a training. And more of people that are getting out of their undergrads, more of them are converting. So I don't see like a huge problem on the entry level, but teams within the companies are expanding. For example, as I said before, 3 years ago we were 15, now we're 50. So I really see that we lack senior management and senior people with experience in these projects to actually like get the projects rolling and do the coaching with everybody. So that's like the main, and also we've started to look abroad. We started to look, I mean, we came here last year to the MIT Master on Business Analytics Career Fair. And we had
Which is next month.
We were all
First week of
proud
February.
with our stand of Credicorp and all the alumni and we were like, oh my God, who's speaking Spanish? That one, let's go and talk to him, because I mean, if they're already studying here, I mean, most of them want to stay here, right? So to try to attract talent to come back home or come back to a neighbor country is also hard, because you are competing now with opportunities with Facebook. Like my friend here, it's very hard. I mean, everybody wants to work on Facebook, on Google, and stay here in the US. But the real challenge and the way the country or our country will move on if its talent come back and start working from the private sector, academia, the public sector, and everything. I mean, we need regulation, we need policies. For example, from Peru, no one from the government was able to come here. So it's kind of like, and we need people that know of the topics, working there and coming back, getting the training abroad, inside, or whatever, coming back and making the change. So I think it's a challenge like that's expands from the private sector to the whole cross-sectional sector.
So Leda's saying if any of you in the audience need a job and want to live in Peru, you gotta speak there. One of the two. So Luis, do you have a sense of Facebook for Latin America? Obviously, up north, it's clear, it's competitive, but what it's like, at least in terms of recruiting from the region?
Specific to the region?
Or what you've seen?
Not specific to the region. I guess what I've seen is, if we think about sort of employees that come from Latin America, then you can see the gap, right? Because for example, at Fair, I think I can count with one hand how many people I know that come from Latin America, and that's really a shame, because diversity like elevates everyone, right? Like different points of view. If you're doing research, it will only give you more sources of ideas that other people might not consider, right? So, I think there are many, at least from what I can tell, there are many factors for this. It's very competitive, so education, it's not just necessarily the quality of education, but for example, let's say to get into a PhD program, if you want to do, be a researcher in a big company, for example, or academia, to get into a PhD program, you usually need to have some sort of publications, and this is hard to get if you are in Latin America and you don't have connections, you don't have sort of like projects that are trying to do this actively, right? I know very good people, people here but there's still a very small minority. So I think like how to fill this gap is like a joint effort between academia and industry. And it's not easy. Maybe we can look at examples from, I guess India has done some things well, right? Now there's like research centers, like Bangalore is like a Silicon Valley in Asia, right? And I know people that finish their PhD programs and I go back and work there because it's appealing for some reason. That sounded wrong, but like it's appealing for them, and there's got to be a good reason for that, right? That's what I mean. And how can we bring these kind of examples, because what you say is real. Like you enter into a competitive program. Maybe now you have the opportunities to work outside, and then you stay there. Right? What is the incentive to go back? And I think we need to work on how to make that more of a reality.
Sure. So Alejandro, you and Softtek has been in the game for a long time. So have you found it more difficult to find qualified employees, or how has the market been, or how have you seen it?
It has always been difficult. I mean, for a company like us, where our assets leave the building every day at 5, 6 o'clock, and we hope that they return next day at 8, 9 o'clock. That has always been a challenge, but despite of that, we have been able to grow from being 1,000 people in 2000 to 15,000 in 2020. So the talent is there.
I'm sorry, are those 15,000 majority Mexicans, or is it Latin pan?
Well, we're spread all over the world, but in Mexico we have 7,500 people located in Mexico. In Latin America, must be somewhere around 9,000 out of no, actually 10,000 out of the 13, right? So out of the 15,000. So we have implemented programs like one program we call the Momentum program. That's an internship program in which we work with universities to bring people in the late stages of their professional education, and they start getting credits by working with us. They can start working in real projects, and we've seen that has been a great success. This last weekend I was in China, and we gave the 10-year recognition from someone that started as a Momentum, as an internship program. And you see that story repeating over and over. So you need to bet on developing the talent, and you need to establish the development programs so you become more attractive for the students and the workforce that is out there. If you're providing that, not only the professional opportunities but also the training. I remember one story when one of the big Indian vendors, I'm not going to mention their name, they were opening their facility in Monterrey. After 6 months they had opened, they say, well, how has been your experience in working in Monterrey? And they said, it's fantastic. And they were saying, well, how about the problem of the challenge of finding talent? I have no problem finding talent. We have Softtek. So they went to Softtek and hired people from Softtek because, and the difference was, and why they were not successful there, was because they were not developing those programs, and we were. So you have to also to commit to develop those programs and to give an added value to the people.
Matias, what about for you guys? You guys have both in the United States and in Latin America, so what's your staffing like?
It's challenging for sure for a small company. We also have the problem that cultural fit is even more important, because if you have a company of 30, 40, 50 people, you have one bad hire, is going to hurt you. So probably, and also competing with Facebook and Google and AWS is really challenging. But I think that this question relates with the previous one, right? What's the role of the industry? And we continue going back to this. What's the role of the industry? How can the industry fix this problem? right? And I think that's really important, at least for us. It's really important that we are known, at least on the environment, or on the meetup scene, or on those kind of places, to be part of that environment. It's a really good place to not only hire people, but also to get aware or get updated on what are the things that are happening. So I think that for us it's really important to be in that environment. A lot of times, all the applications that we add are from people that are part of a meetup, or from a group, or a user group, or someone that saw a talk. So I consider it really important to be part of that environment. And also another thing that we sometimes do is try to look more for the attitude and for the talent than from the specialization. And I can see that this is maybe a wrong approach in a lot of companies, that they are trying to look for a specific specialist for something. If you need a specific specialist, that's okay. But if you are looking for someone to build a team or something like that, maybe you can look for something that is really engaged, that has a lot of talent, that has a lot of power, and maybe convince him or try to coach them into leading a team and transforming a little bit the company.
So Miguel, something that we've heard a lot is poaching. So how does RIMAC, who's part of, right, a big conglomerate for Latin America, the Breco Group, how do you prevent a bank, Facebook, or people leaving Peru and going anywhere? Because at this day and age, right, anyone who's a good programmer can find the job anywhere.
Yeah.
So how do you, as a big conglomerate that can't just like a startup say, well, we'll give you stock shares, or we'll, let you eat wherever you want, or we'll provide you certain lunch or bar.
Kombucha.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Like, we got a couple of people that left the company to go to Amazon in Costa Rica and in Madrid. I think in Latin America we have a huge advantage, which will not persist. And that advantage is we got very talented people coming out of universities that have not been identified yet, or by the big companies, Facebook, Google, et cetera. They're starting to. But we can still take advantage of these hidden diamonds and train them. And I think that's a huge asset we have in Latin America. How our strategy is basically invest a lot. Like, we've decided not to go into the price salary wars, just because it's like, we want people who want to be there, who want to be working on the purpose of the company, working on the purpose of the group. We try to pay well, like 75 to 85% percentile in terms of salaries. We take out the exceptions. Like, there's companies paying ridiculous amount of money. And honestly, if someone wants to go for that, we usually let them go, because like, we will always try to keep and train and invest in people, and we'll help them get to grad school. We want to publish. We hired a professor from MIT for 3 years and brought him down to train our CEOs, and we had weekly calls with the data science team in the group. We're creating a advisory board for the insurance company that has many top professors in the States. There's 8 people from RIMAC here, so we're bringing our data scientists. So we're trying to connect them and give them things that they can learn, that they're happy. We want to always pay them well. We want them to share in the profits, because they're creating a lot of money for the company. So we think it's only fair that we increase bonuses. And we're fighting, in a good sense, with HR, trying to find a way for this new type of talent that's creating so much opportunities. And honestly, I think the biggest thing, besides these things we're doing, that's allowing us to have good talent is them. They attract. Good talent attracts good talent. People go to Google, people go to Facebook, because there's a lot of it's a great company, but there's great people there too, right? So I think we are lucky that we have really good people, and a lot of people want to come and work with us. Yes, there's cases of poaching, and that's always going to exist. But yeah.
And Gustavo, earlier you said the benefits of being next to your neighbor north, but in terms of getting people and preventing them from leaving, has that helped? Or do you see a lot of US people that want to come down to work for you in Mexico? Or is it pretty much Mexicans working in a Mexico office?
It's a little bit of both. Let me elaborate. When we started our cloud and artificial intelligence practice in 2014-15, because we had a couple of clients that needed that, we didn't have the practice. So we hired a couple of interns. That time was probably 8. And they were probably 18 months just reading books, doing tutorials, whatever that was available. And we started doing proof of concept until we started getting our real projects with the banks and the retailers. And at that point, we had the skill. When we had the skill, we're doing interesting projects that made it interesting for smart young interns to bring other interns. And we usually train 2 years our interns to have them to a level that they are competitive on the technology and industry they have. So the first thing is here, if you want talent, you need to invest and have your practice and your knowledge, and you need to invest a lot of money on the people and the practice. So talent is not, is going to be raw talent, but how you want to shape that talent with your particular needs, it's a big investment and a big commitment. And we obviously, some of our first interns now work in US, and I think it's really good because it means that we are training them great, that they're exposed to global projects, and for the rest of the team, it's a motivator that at some point, if they keep working these kind of things, they can become really competitive with the rest of the world. Now that we're getting to a point that we're having more global projects, I think it's really important to realize that even this economy with great growth in IT sector especially, cannot afford to keep paying $200,000 jobs in the US and depending the state how much they pay. So this is where we have the greatest opportunity in Mexico, right? Because it's a fraction of the cost. We have a great commitment, and it's a great opportunity for us to change our economy. Another last thing that is really important to mention is that in the 1990s, 2000, the name of the industry was get more people the cheapest possible way. That's why India and other parts of Asia grew a lot. But now with all the capabilities built into cloud computing, if we are able to grow to a 2,000-3,000 people company, but that his niche expertise into some industries and some technologies, this is going to accomplish more than a company that has 100,000 people. So it's how we see this thing.
So one of the big problems we've heard now is education, but what keeps you up at night? What's your biggest fear for industry in Latin America in terms of AI and development? Where are you most scared of? Is it ethical issues? Is it regulation? Is it lack of being able to pay employees? Where are you most scared for the future of AI development in terms of Latin America? Start with Facebook. Look the other way.
I guess one fear is that this technology has a lot of potential, affect like basically almost any branch of human endeavors, and it's not good. I mean, ironically, I work for Facebook, but it's not good that this becomes centralized into a few different players, and because it can be that it already is big, but this difference can be so big that it might be impossible to sort of close the gap between basically the entities that have managed information and innovation and everyone else, right? And a fear is that Latin America gets left behind, right? We need to keep up to prevent, so Latin America becomes a player in this game. And I think how to keep up is the great challenge.
So, Miguel, RIMAC's goal is to manage risk, right? You're an insurance company.
Yep.
So what are the biggest risks you see for the private sector in terms of AI and the problems that you see going forward?
I think the biggest, I think there's this wave of people investing in AI. I think Latin America is probably very applied. I think there's very few spots doing pure AI research. But I think the biggest risk for us as a company and in general in Peru is not meeting the expectations and the promise made by AI in terms of value. And I think that there's where a lot of companies are struggling. A lot of companies are investing in talent, but a lot of companies are divesting as well, because they have not been, I think execution and focus on value is key. And sometimes it's hard because you got people who love research, algorithms, math, and Leda was saying it earlier, like, you just want to like work on these things that are passionate, and in the end, the company, the CEO, the managers are interested in value because that's what pays the payroll. So I think there, just having a clear focus on where's the value and how to execute that and capture the value is probably one of the important areas, and addresses one of the risks, which is not fulfilling the expectations.
Anyone else?
I said it this morning at a company level. We have a mixed feelings with regards to AI. On one end, there's the fear of not moving fast enough, and the platforms start incorporating more and more and displacing the services that we bring to our customers and embedding that into the platform itself. That's certainly a fear. But it's also enthusiasm about the possibilities. Now we can move forward. Now we don't have to spend time fixing bugs because we are using cognitive testing to accelerate the discovery of those possible defects and anticipate before those defects happen. So if we start using that more and more, on that regard, we would be able to succeed, and we would be able to be more effective in providing value to our customers. The value that we provide to our customers is not having more people there; it's by enabling them to do more things. So the technology is eventually going to help us to do that. I think that's the fear at a company level. Probably from a more macro perspective, the biggest fear, and this is one thing that I'm seeing in some of the administrations in the region, not realizing that this is going to have an economic effect in the mid and long term. And sometimes, yes, there is this feeling that probably AI is not fulfilling its promise, but we know that this is exponential, right? So it's going to keep growing, and eventually, if we don't realize of the power, and we don't make the adjustments in the education programs, in the economic models, if we still model our economy based on the past and not on the future, and putting our eyes on the future, eventually AI is going to eat the cake of the economies that don't put the emphasis on that.
Well, I would like to complement what Alex was just mentioning, that we have US and we have China really as players implementing the real technology that is changing everything. And we're going to have, again, my fear going back is like we're going to go back like in the past, like the colonies again, because who are going to have the geopolitical power if everything runs on the cloud at some point in 5-10 years, and no country in Latin America has the resources to compete really with these technologies, or probably not even other sectors in the world can compete at this point. So what is going to happen when you have two options, is we're going to have a cloud war, like a Cold War? Are you either with these vendors or the Asian or Chinese vendors? So I think this is really important, complementing to what Alex was mentioning, because the power is going to be on this. And if they charge a couple of cents per transaction, per image, per everything, they're going to own literally everything. So how we're going to understand the economy in the future without having fear or understanding this. That's why we're really interested in on piggybacking on this wave and make sure we get a couple of cents of each transaction as well. All right?
Sure. Matias? Oh, sorry, Leda.
I wanted to add a little bit of a main fear, complemented a bit what Miguel's saying. Like, I see that on the market there are a lot of private or whatever companies developing all these applications, including AI. So my biggest fear, considering that we are still like starting using this in LATAM, is like somehow some companies can start deploying to the public these AI solutions without a proper security, like to prevent cyber attacks or the robbery of information, and don't comply with data privacy regulation, or doesn't have the enough technological support for the stability of the apps. And somehow, if this happens, because there's been some attacks, at least in Peru, like that got to the press, public reacts. How does it react? It will affect the whole sector, because they will go back in the use, no? And just to give a little bit of context, yeah, like most of our citizens have smartphones, but really the bank is still struggling against cash. So like more than 50% of the people are still saving under the mattress, and they're scared of the ATM. And it's not like we have a large set of customers that are digital. So we are building to be ahead of time of these tools and channels like chatbots, but really now the scale is very low, right? So that's another fear / challenge. It's like how to like increase this adoption in the public, this a little bit of culture, and in that sense we have like a role as a financial educating people. But the thing is that we are on this hype. And if we start like launching all this intelligence AI on apps without like responsibility, like, and sometimes we have to go for the responsibility even if the government hasn't have the regulation on hand. We don't need, I mean, we have to be responsible, not because there's a regulation, because it's real, and we have to be accountable for whatever we deploy to the public. So I think that we have to, I don't know, go through that path, not like rushing in because next month we have to launch something. So being very conscious, because the impact, it can backfire. I mean, the public reacts, right? And it can be like a chain, and it will delay the adoption and moving forward of the country or whatever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I would like to complement. I think that is a problem of expectations a lot of times, how to manage expectations. I think 3 or 4 years ago, it was the cloud, and then it was, I don't know, now it's Bitcoin, blockchain. A lot of times in media, you have these words, and what you do is basically to scare people. A lot of people are really scared about implementation of things. For example, with autonomous vehicles, it's really funny how one mortal accident of a car can generate a lot of hysteria, and we have accidents every day by cars driven by humans, right? So a lot of times I think it's a responsibility of everyone as a community, of the media, and I also think that it's also a responsibility for the industry. A lot of times it's really difficult. It's the same thing on our industry. We have some issues with FDA trying to make them understand how all algorithm works, and it's not the same as it was in the past, that you can see the workflow and you can see all the possibilities. Right now it's a model, and you have really complex scenarios, really complex things, and it's really important for the industry to be part of that discussion, right? To help them understand how can you audit an algorithm, or how you can audit a model.
So just building on something you said, the issue of responsibility, and this is a major discussion here MIT, and it's also something that came out during the summit, is the issue of ethics. So we all know that whatever conversation is happening in the United States, until it starts in Latin America, 10 to 15 years. If it gets regulated in the US, it takes another 20 years. So whatever is happening with AI and ethics in the US, we won't see it until some of us are walking with canes. So we're going to be in big trouble. And what is your feeling? And you can remove yourself from your company because lawyers don't want to hear this, but what is the responsibility of the private sector with AI? Because real soon when banking is going to be done by AI, or insurance policies is totally, or software that are in hospitals are being done by AI, whose responsibility it is when someone dies, loses money, loses their house, who's to blame? And I think that in Latin America, I know there's some government officials here, I think they're so far behind, and I apologize if I'm insulting anyone, but I think they're so far behind in thinking about the ethical issues of who's in charge when AI is actually making decisions and it's not a person anymore, because who are you going to sue for collusion? Who are you going to sue for damages? There's no longer that issue. So you can either represent your company or not, but what are your feelings of what Latin America needs to do, or what the private industry's role will have to be with these ethical issues? Gustavo? Sorry.
No.
Question.
In terms of ethics is really important, because at some point it's going to affect us at a personal level, at your family, at your business, at your society. So we need to understand, we were talking about language the other day a little bit, how is it going to affect how Spanish is implemented into solution. When we roll out the first solutions for a couple of banks in Mexico, we had to raise a lot of tickets with the cloud vendors because a lot of the words and a couple of things were not accepted by the frameworks. So, and they took, like, at the beginning, like, longer to solve these kind of issues, because it was, their priority was to solve whatever they had rolling on in their big business in US. So the relevance as a region to fight for our rights and ethics has to become very clear, because this is so big that probably a country itself cannot do it against these big trends. And how they're going to affect the cost of your policy if you get sick and everybody gets to know because of all this information is a big thing that we are not ready to really understand how it's going to really affect us. But I think to keep discussing and to speak out loud is going to be very important when we don't understand, and how to provide feedback to the authorities. Because I was in the other panel, they asked something about that, and I said the relationship between companies and the government should be like a marriage. Some days you're good, some days you're not so good, but you may need to make it work. And we need to figure out how to make it work in terms of ethics and regulation.
Sadly, sometimes marriages end in divorce. But so what are your feelings about Gustavo's idea that it has to be bigger than government, that it has to be a strategy? You know, is it one of the economic blocks, or that will do it, or is it, the Trans-Pacific? What's the way?
Well, I guess I'm not equipped to answer that question. I think that is a bigger question that I don't know, when you jump into a driverless Uber car in Mexico City and you happen to indicate what route that a car is taken, and you happen to be involved in an accident, okay, whose fault it is? Is it Uber Mexico? Is it your fault because you decided which route that is going to take? Whoever created the algorithm of the driverless car? And the answer today is I don't know. But I think that needs to be taken into a bigger umbrella. You were referring to NAFTA, or the new version of NAFTA, which is basically the same, right? We went through all this mess to end up with an updated version.
Trump needs to get on the news somehow, right?
But some of the updates that were done, which, by the way, were taken from the TPP. They were already on TPP, were related to intellectual property, e-commerce, import and export of data, data localization. That was the term I was thinking. I think AI ethics and regulation on that regard needs to be taken into an umbrella, pretty much like NAFTA, a regional. That this has to be beyond the confines of a specific country, I think.
So two people have pushed it more on government and country, but what about private sector?
I think it's difficult, right? I think it's our role in the end to anticipate what's happening. And I think this globalized world, we kind of have to, because like if we wait for our Latin American governments to update the regulations and the laws so that we are compliant with what the States, the Europe is doing, it'll be late. And what's going to happen is a lot of these companies are probably going to come in and we might just be at a disadvantage. But at the same time, the lack of regulation, or the gap in regulation, is an opportunity, which is not necessarily an ethical opportunity, because sometimes we're allowed to manipulate data in a way because our regulation is not the best one from the point of view of customer protection. And many companies in the States, many startups come to work to Latin America because they don't have HIPAA, they don't have all these more stringent regulations. We as RIMAC, we decided to be more stringent and more harsh on how we were treating data, just because we're expecting GDPR from Europe to come to Peru. And I think there's been changes in the law. It's making the privacy protection law in Peru more stringent, more protective of the user, and that's good. That takes away a lot of our opportunity to use data for the benefit of the users and also for the benefit of us. But then there's also something that's hard is there's ethical aspects. Like we've decided many years ago to not buy data that's not legal, right? And there's so many providers in Latin America that just steal data, have insiders who provide data. And it's difficult because you know your competitors, or some competitors, are probably using these black market data sets, and we don't, right? And so you're not really competing fairly. So yeah, it's not easy.
Challenging, for sure. I think that one thing that I mentioned when we started is that I think these kind of events are really important because put a lot of people from different places in the same room discussing what's important. And I can really see a necessity of doing it, not only for the AI, but things that are already happening. You install an application and then you don't know what you accept, or for example, maybe with an autonomous car, it's difficult because you have to go through customs. But for example, flying a drone, you have some regulations here in the States, but you can buy a drone and go to whatever other place. You don't have any regulations. So what about those kind of things? So I think that in these cases, it's really important that we treat them as a regional problem. And for me, the answer is to be united, to be close, to try to work together on these kind of things that are really important for our communities and also for the industry, because it's something impossible to think to develop something different for different countries. So I think that we should aim to have something more like an umbrella, like more broad.
Excellent. Luis?
Yes, so earlier, I'm almost going to say I'm not feel qualified, but I could give an opinion. And some things that I don't think it's just the government that is supposed to. I think it's a conversation that has to happen between industry and government. I know that that seems obvious to me, especially when there's big players in industry that can have a large impact, right? So, and I think that's happening. Maybe not you know, in the smoothest of way, but that conversation already has started to happen. I think one challenge that I see in Latin America, to complement something that was earlier, is that it's important to consider the ethical impact of AI, but these things, at least given the reality of Latin America, it's like a very long-term kind of, you know, like to consider the impact, the ethical impact. You first need to consider how are you going to use it, how you're going to develop this technology. So the challenge is, how do you keep the ethical conversation ongoing when your immediate, you know, need is something else, right? You need to make this useful, right? And the example of having, you know, to compete with people that don't care about the ethics, I can see that happening in Latin America, right? So how can you reconcile both things? I think that's the big challenge. Like, you don't forget the ethical part, but, you know, solve your day-to-day issues.
Yes, I know it's a hard challenge. It's hard to address even in the US, so like for us to kind of think right now what's the best solution. The only thing I think I can add, because pretty much everything is being covered, is that from the technical side, for example, an ethics problem that's very common in the US, that's the bias, like per minorities or whatever. The classical example of the bank and application, that you have a model running, then for certain ethnicities, you have like more error or whatever, and you see that there's problems and there's no fairness, right? From the technical side, the tools to address that are already developed and are not that rocket science. So the thing I see that we can start working on, that's probably not something that we're not used to, is start to address. And the first thing, address those biases, and the first thing is to give them visibility. So in Peru, at least, the main bias that I see that can be like have a great impact is region. I mean, you have Lima and the rest. And the jungle is kind of like the last wheel of the, no? So that will be like a first view that we will have to like start working on, first giving it visibility and then see how to address it. Then the other thing you have a lot of informal economy is crazy high. And I know for sure, my hand's on fire, there's a big bias there. If you come from the informal side, you don't have the same possibilities that from the formal side. You cannot like report your income like in a properly and accepted way, formal way. So we have the knowledge. The thing is that from the development of models or analytics, it's not a view that we are accustomed to because no one asked us to do it. But I think if we start being more proactive and learning from like what is happening abroad, we can start doing stuff and not wait until we have a regulation, until we have like a pact, like a Latin American. I mean, we can start like working on those because the statistical tools to address that is like are over there. I mean, it's not rocket science. Like I said earlier, it's easy to solve and view, right? But the thing is that you have to invest. It takes more time, only, right?
So we have about 15 minutes left, and I'd like to give the audience, some time to ask you some questions. But if we could just go around and just try to finish up, thinking on a more positive or ending on a more positive high note, as it's after 3 days of this. What's your, from a private sector perspective, what's your aspiration, or what are you most looking forward to, or something fun that you see AI can do in Latin America that can't be done other places, right? How can we rely on what Latin America is doing to bring AI forward, or to do something cool that's different, that it's not just coming from other places?
One of the things I've been thinking a lot about, and I don't have the answer, is there's so much need and so much there's a budget constraint in Latin America. So the idea of data as currency, and how can we find spaces where people can be incentivized to give us their data, assuming they trust and there's good procedures to protecting the data, but where that information is used to be able to find a win-win solution for companies or governments and provide services that address that. And that data is actually helping them because it's providing better information to build these products, to profile risk better, to et cetera, right? I think that's one. I think it's an aspiration we have in Peru and in Breca and RIMAC is how do we make Peru a international hub for AI? And we really are pushing for that.
Well, we're trying to build the most interesting chatbot in the world. And I think Mexico and Latin America has a great potential because I think...
I like to speak a lot.
Yeah, we like to speak a lot and we like to engage in endless conversations. But what I'm trying to say is that I don't want to tell jokes about any country, but it's usually, we're warmer people, right?
Yep.
And so if we're able to package this cultural vibe that we're really good at by nature, and if we're able to provide the right analytics, if you call to a bank and the chatbot makes you think you're his friend, and it solves your problems and gives you advices and reminds you something, that's the most interesting, you know?
Yeah. It's wonderful.
Yeah, so we're trying to build and implement the most interesting chatbot in the world with a Mexican touch, a Peruvian touch, no, a Chilean, Colombian, everybody, Latin American touch, and maybe culture and accent and how to present jokes or not is going to be an attribute.
That's
right?
Wonderful. Yeah, it's a great vision.
So I think it's an exciting future for Mexico, for Latin America, for US, for artificial intelligence. And it's really exciting times. And I hope you'll use our chatbot in the near future, right?
Alejandro?
Well, I think the creativity, the Latin American creativity, I think it's boundless, and this is going to be exponential. And it's going to be a lot of fun. One thing though that I think sometimes we fall in the trap of undermining ourselves. One of the things that we usually use or it's commonly used as a measure to see how innovative one country is the number of patents, right?
Sure.
And yes, definitely Latin America is lagging behind in number of patents. But once I heard someone said, don't try to equate innovation to invention. The Segway, the scooter, it's a great invention, but Starbucks is a great innovation, right? Starbucks didn't use anything that was not already there. And one example that comes to mind is one of our clients, Grupo Lala, the dairy producer. They were in Mexico, as you know, there are mom and pop shops all over. The retail is like that, and what they do is they distribute refrigerators to all these mom and pop shops, the corner stores, the corner shops, and they want to have their products there. And they want those refrigerators, those fridges, to be used exclusively for their products. So they were trying to figure out what was the best way to do it. So they came up with, okay, let's take a picture every now and then and compare it. Use artificial intelligence to compare the picture and see if the products are filled, right? That was one approach. Another approach was to use weights, right? To measure how much each shelf weighted, right? And they come up with the most clever solution using a sensor that costs like pennies. They measure how many times the door was open, the fridge door was open. And then they correlated that to the data on that store, how much Lala products they were selling that store was selling. And they knew, they were able, by matching that, they knew that which stores were putting some other products in their refrigerators because they have more door openings and less sales. So sometimes AI is not the solution, and sometimes the most basic technology is the solution. So my point is that when the technology starts becoming more available and we match that with our creativity, I think the possibilities are going to be endless.
Excellent.
I can see how historically in Latin America specifically, since we have less resources, a lot of time one of the things that are more compromised are the research and the development, and a lot of times this is only for big companies, right? Startups doesn't have enough resources to do research and development or to use state-of-the-art tools. But what I'm seeing lately is with the penetration of technology, that right now it's really cheap to buy a computer or to have an internet connection. The thing that excites me a lot is try to see how a lot of technologies can live together and create a better place for us. For example, combining cloud computing. Cloud computing is not only about hardware, but also about giving you services. So I'm really excited about people that are really creative, as we all should agree, really creative with a lot of tools that they don't need that much resources to use them, combining with other technologies like IoT, like blockchain, like Bitcoin, like a lot of things. I think that it's not now, it's not tomorrow, it's not next month, but it will come eventually, the combination of all that forces, and I'm really hopeful that I'm really excited about what Latin America can what's the part that can play on that act.
Excellent. Luis?
Yep, so I guess as a researcher, one thing that I think is maybe interesting about Latin America is that the problems here can be the problems in Latin America can be of a different nature than the problems in the developed countries. Like the amount of data that you have, the type of data that you have, the amount of resources that you have to treat that data, which means that it opens up a whole series of different research problems that are not available or people are not thinking about on this side because they don't have them, right? And there are interesting questions, right? So I think that's an opportunity, and who knows, maybe the answer to these questions can improve the other side as well. So I think that's very interesting, and a huge opportunity. And I guess in a more social aspect, kind of building on what Gustavo said, like about the culture, I think for example, the U.S. can be a very competitive. There's a lot of competition, and I think in Latin, at least my experience when I was back in Venezuela, this sort of like competitive environment was not a part of my day-to-day experience. So how can there's an opportunity to be sort of like be at the forefront of what's happening, but sort of on a more warm environment, right? I think that's also I don't know. I think will be very exciting.
Excellent.
Well, after these 3 marvelous days and meeting all these people and everything that everybody's doing, one thing that I can say is that we should actually give ourselves more credit. I'm completely sure that we can actually compete in the technical ways and in private sector, NGOs or whatever at the same level of Europe and the US. But to start doing and start having this adventure spirit, this curiosity, putting into something tangible, we have to have this confidence and say we can do it and start working on that. I mean, the change will come from us. As you said, our problems are completely different. I mean, microfinance, right, is something that the US and Europe will never, ever understand at all. Informal economy, like issues we have with data and everything, the only people that are capable of solving and addressing using AI as tool or not are ourselves. So we have to start giving ourselves more credit and start working on those fields, because we see it and expect for solutions to come from abroad. nothing will happen. And I see that we do have the talent, the experience, the funding, everything we can get. So.
Excellent. So in the few minutes that we have left, does anyone from the audience have any questions for the private sector panel? And if you do, just raise your hand so that, can you come to the mic just so we can hear you?
Yes, hello, I'm Enrique Zucar from Inaue, Mexico. I'm in academia, and one of the big differences I see from Latin America and the US is a collaboration between industry and academia. We haven't been able to do that in Latin America. In particular, like investment in academia is very low from industry. Here, there's a Gates building almost in every university, and we don't have any slim building in Mexico. So how can we get to do this more collaboration between academia and industry? And I think that can help some of the problems you have mentioned, for instance, in the creation of talent or in developing our own technology and not have to be so dependent on technology from other countries.
Thank you. So just in terms of time, does one of you want to take each question so we can have more than one question? Does anyone want to take the industry, academia, which we spoke about? But that would be very organized, and this is Latin America. So, does anyone want to take?
Someone said that in Latin America, even the past is unpredictable, right? I think there's in our case we collaborate a lot, and I explained the program that we have. I think that's something that we can replicate, the program, the Momentum program, having interns working as part of a Softtek team and working with the universities in putting together the curricula. That's something that we have done for over 15, 17 years, and it has been very, very successful, and that is something that I think can be replicated.
And just to add, as working in MIT with universities in Latin America, as much as universities like to push it on industry, universities in Latin America need to work with themselves, with each other first, because it's very difficult, especially from MIT, when one university says, we want to work with you. Well, how does MIT decide? It's much easier when groups come together and say, we're already working together in Mexico City, in Lima, at several universities, and we'd like to work with industry or with MIT or other universities. So when people come together and collaborate, it makes it much easier for others to want to collaborate with you. So that's also the other end, that oftentimes academia blames it on industry, but it's also within academia that we have to work together. So, next question, please.
Who was first?
Okay. My name is Christopher Fry. I worked in and around MIT for decades. Right now I'm teaching a class with a colleague called Why Can't We All Just Get Along? The idea of the class is to solve all the big problems. I have some comments about Latin America. First of all, on Peru. I was in Peru once in the 70s. What a fantastic country. The diversity of the biome and the geography and the culture was incredible. I've been to Mexico a bunch of times. My heart bleeds for Mexico. I'm very concerned about the crime rate and the drug gangs and all that, and I feel embarrassed that a lot of that is caused by America. So, as far as the
North America, United
yes,
States, right? This
yes.
is all America.
Now, let me be more specific. United States.
Of America.
Looking okay right now. I'm from USA. I was born in LA, actually. Now, for the strengths of Latin America, I think one of your big strengths is to be able to think outside the box of the major institutions that we have here in the United States. By major institutions, I mean capitalism and government, including democracy. So I observe that Latin Americans are more, let me say, courageous in looking at very different structures of economy. And I know that these haven't always worked out. You know, Venezuela is a problem right now, for example. But don't give up on those larger dreams, on those idealistic things. One of the core technologies I work on is solving poverty. And I mean solving poverty, making everybody be relatively wealthy. I think this is within our technological grasp. This is what we talk about in our class. And I think you have the potential to leapfrog the normal Western world in solving poverty and get beyond many of the problems that we have here in the United States. Just don't aspire to what we have. Go the next level. You can do it, and I'll be happy to help.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks. Excellent. So in terms of time, our last question.
Thank you. Very quickly, Yolanda Martinez from Inter-American Development Bank. I would like to know what are your plans for investments in the next 5 years?
Well, I'm sure they're all hoping you will co-invest, so make life easier for them.
No, because I think it's very interesting to see what are your priorities when thinking about investments and the region with those investments.
You guys all want to go down and see where you're going to invest in?
You mean like within my team or as the bank as
an organization?
As an organization, where do you think the bank is going?
Well, Credicorp is a Peruvian-based economical group, and I know that it has a few lines of business, like banking, like insurance, microfinance. And I know that at this moment we have operations mainly in Peru and Bolivia, and from investment banking in Chile, Colombia, and we're starting to get into Ecuador. I know there's like a plan of investing in microfinance in Colombia, like getting into those markets and expanding across South America, like the core lines of business. But I'm actually not prepared to answer that question. And from the analytics part, we're starting to work with Bolivia, for example. And since Bolivia is a smaller bank, actually everything that we see and we learn, we share it with them. But they have to face a different environment because it's very regulated. I mean, the banking industry is very regulated, so they have different problems and so on. So my expectation from our side, like the analytics team side, is that the learnings that we have, we will spread it like across, like along the expansion of the economical group.
Mm-hmm. Luis, real quickly, do you know what Facebook is hoping to do other than take over the world?
I guess I'm closer to the research side. In research, there's a lot of interest in healthcare applications, and that's sort of like the most exciting to me, like healthcare, producing open research in healthcare. I don't know if you would call that as an investment. Maybe it's an intellectual investment, I guess.
Matias?
We are a startup. We are just trying to get till the end of the month. And we'll see what happens in February.
All right.
For us, it's three areas. One, investing in developing our technology platform, cognitive platform, Frida and Diego. That's one area. The other area is higher-end consulting capabilities, being closer to the business of our customer. And the third one is talent development across the board.
Excellent. Gustavo?
Well, for us, in terms of solutions, is chatbots and advanced analytics. In terms of geographies, outside Mexico is going to be California and Texas. And in terms of industries, well, in Mexico will be a priority Monterrey. And in terms of industries, is financial services, retail, telco, and manufacturing.
We are, I'll respond, there's two things there. Internally, we'll probably spend like $250,000 on training our people in analytics and in this space. And at the educational level, the family that owns the group is investing many $1 million to train Peruvians in artificial intelligence, not for the group, but for Peru. So, and we're actually looking for multilateral organizations to partner with.
So I'd like to thank the panel, the organizers, and you, the audience. I think it was a great way to just about finish the conference. Entonces, muchas gracias. Y estamos casi al tiempo.
Gracias.